When Mauricio Pochettino came into Chelsea Football Club and took the reins after a year of total chaos, I was optimistic. When we held title challengers Liverpool to a draw on the opening day, I was confident, and the following weekend, when we lost to West Ham, I was confused, and the up and down form of Chelsea since that opening day has continued with no signs of stopping. But after Saturday's complete collapse at St James's Park at the hands of a very good Newcastle side, I'm seeing a lot of people online questioning whether or not Pochettino is the man to make Chelsea great again. Because when you're 13 games into the season, you're sat in 10th and you're closer to the relegation zone than you are the top four, it's pretty easy to lose faith. But I am about to tell you exactly why we need to trust Mauricio Pochettino. Right, what's happening, people, and welcome back to the Joey Knight podcast. Now, at the end of the video, if you like the content and you want to see more from myself, please hit the subscribe button and also click the bell, because then you get a notification every time one of my videos goes live. I've been asking you lot to do it recently. It's really helping me out. Please smash the like button. Let's get into it. Okay, so let me just clarify that pressure mounting in the media is not the same as pressure mounting within the club. But despite the fact we've lost a few games already this season, and we will lose a few more, the pressure has seemed to start mounting a lot after this defeat against Newcastle. And I can kind of understand it, right? Because we've gone in and we've put in really good performances in recent weeks against Arsenal, against Manchester City, against Spurs, and then we come off the back of not only our best performance, I would say, this season in the 4-4 draw against Manchester City, but I would say the best performance we've seen since probably Borussia Dortmund at home in the Champions League last season. So it's a long time before we've seen a Chelsea side show any character, any fight, and battle it out with the big boys. And then we go into that Newcastle game, and the context is there, isn't it? They're ravished by injuries. They've got 3 goalkeepers on the bench because they can't even put out a full bench. And Chelsea need to capitalise on it. We've seen the moments of brilliance, and we've seen that we can hang it with the big boys, but now we need to beat another top 4 contender and really propel ourselves up the league, and it just didn't happen. And there's no shame in losing, but the way we lost was unacceptable. We completely fell flat. We were not ready for the occasion. We were not ready for the intensity of Newcastle, and ultimately we weren't the better team on the day. And that does happen. There's been times this season when we've lost games and their outrage and outcry was nowhere near as loud as it was after this Newcastle game. And I think that one thing that would definitely play into that were Mauricio Pochettino's comments after the match. Now, I've spoke about these comments, and obviously Poch was pretty scathing about the players. He said that they showed a lack of character, a lack of energy, weak in the challenge and stuff like that. Now, those comments I actually think were quite fair. But one thing that I'd rather he hadn't have said in the press conference was that he was intending to cancel training, because we've seen in the coming days after that he didn't cancel training. Players were out and about. Nicholas Jackson went to Villarreal to watch a match, I think. So, yeah, the training wasn't cancelled, and for that, he's always going to come under a little bit of scepticism and criticism, because it's like, well, you said you were going to do it. Why didn't you do it? Does that show a lack of control over these players? And I completely understand that. But I do think that the words he used and the way he described that performance were in line with what we had seen. It was fair. And I think that there's a certain thing which is like human behaviour for us to only remember the newsworthy events in football. So, say, for example, if Poch blames the players, the first thing we're going to do is go, oh, that doesn't go well when you blame the players. You know, we saw last season Steven Gerrard blaming his Aston Villa players. We saw Brendan Rodgers blaming the Leicester players. And very shortly after that, both of those were given the door. However, I can look back at history and say I've seen multiple times that Arsene Wenger blamed his players. I've seen multiple times that Alex Ferguson blamed his players. Last season, I remember Pep Guardiola blaming his players after Manchester City dropped points away to Nottingham Forest. And what happened there? Did Pep get shown the door? No. Was he out long after? No. Those exact same players that he blamed went on to win him a treble that season. So I understand that we're always going to associate the more negative examples of when maybe a manager might blame the players and then it all unravels for them. But I don't necessarily think that blaming your players if it's intended to get a reaction, then goes on to get the right reaction, is a bad thing in football. But me justifying Pochettino's comments does not mean that after 13 games in the Premier League, we should be sitting in 10th position. It doesn't bode well for him when you make the comparisons of Ange at Spurs. They've lost their last 3, but he's done really good things since joining Tottenham. Unai Emery at Aston Villa, he took them from relegation candidates to fighting for Europa League football and obviously qualifying for the Conference League, and now this season sitting in 4th place with them, looking really, really impressive. The man that I think has done the most impressive job, Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe has gone into that Newcastle side, and the first thing people can say is, oh yeah, there's been a takeover and they've got money and whatever. They haven't been allowed to spend that money for the most part. And when they have spent it, they've been desperately unlucky with the likes of Tonali and whatnot. But you look at last night, he's got a draw in the Champions League against PSG, and he's playing players that have been there, you know, in relegation battles with Newcastle. So I think Eddie Howe's another really, really impressive one. But with the managers I've just named, we've got to look at the underlying context here, you know. When Unai Emery came into Aston Villa, he was in a situation very much like Ange Postecoglou when he came into Spurs, where there's stability in the club. The owners have somewhat of a tried and proven track record, and they haven't just gone through a year of complete uncertainty. Now, you could look at that and you could go, well, Eddie Howe, he was coming in under new owners, and I completely understand that. But mate, anyone could have took over Newcastle and they would have a million times more love from the fan base than obviously Mike Ashley was getting. So when Mike Ashley left Newcastle, all of a sudden the vibes were just through the roof. The weight had been lifted off of St James's Park and the fans felt like they had their club back. And I do believe that that sort of fairy tale story of getting rid of an owner that everyone hated and getting new ones in will always bode well. Chelsea's situation was not that. Chelsea had to get rid of an owner that we loved and get one in that we were uncertain on. And that's not to discredit the jobs that any of those managers have done at their clubs respectively. I'm just giving you a bit of background context. For background context, let's look at the 3 managers that are leading the table at the minute. Pep Guardiola, even with the Manchester City team that he's got and he's built over years, did not win the league in his first season. He finished 3rd in his first season, you know. Jurgen Klopp, he finished 8th at Liverpool in his first season. Arteta, he finished 8th back-to-back and then had a season where they finally pushed on and pushed for Champions League football but ended up bottling it. And all of these managers were given time to get it right. And although I'm not justifying the fact that we sit 10th in the table this season, if you looked at Pochettino's track record, you would have seen that this is a trend we've seen throughout his management career. Poch's first season at any club he's managed always seems to have inconsistency and ups and downs. At Espanyol, in his first season, he loses 16 games. His first full season with Southampton, he loses 12. First full season with Spurs, he loses 12. And when you look at every single second season Pochettino's had, whether it be at Espanyol, at Southampton, at Spurs, or even at PSG, he has always managed to finish considerably higher than he did in his first season. Now, if we look at Pochettino's first 13 games at Tottenham, it actually looks very similar to his first 13 games at Chelsea. He had 2 more wins on the board at this point in his first 13 games at Tottenham, but I would say the level of opposition was a little bit weaker, and when Pochettino in that time had come up against some of the bigger teams, like a Man City, for example, like a Liverpool, he had lost those matches. When he's come up against those teams with Chelsea, he's obviously got good results in those matches and at least failed to be beat. But what I would say is it took Pochettino until I think it was the 20th game of the season till he was able to register 3 wins on the bounce with that Tottenham Hotspur side. So going on those stats, there was every indication that Pochettino was always going to take time to get consistency in this team. However, when you look at it right now and you say, okay, let's say, for example, this season it finishes sort of around mid-table as we are. And let's say next season we have a significant jump and we go from 10th to all the way up to 6th or 5th. Yeah, okay, you know, you might have jumped 5, 6 places, but at the end of the day, as far as these boys are off of competing for titles, that needs to be the aim. And do we want another season next year where we're still not competing for titles and we're just about competing for Champions League football? And the answer to that is obviously no. But do I believe that Pochettino is the man to be able to push us a hell of a lot higher on than just jumping a few places in the league like he has in seasons gone by of his other teams? Yes. Now, Pochettino never finished outside the top 5 in the Premier League with Tottenham Hotspur. He mounted 2 serious title challenges with Spurs, albeit obviously falling short. And I would say that, yes, okay, he had Son, he had Kane, and he had some brilliant signings at Spurs. But pound for pound, they didn't have the depth that Chelsea have right now. And I don't think they had the young talent at all that Chelsea do right now. So I think that he's in a better position now to compete with Chelsea than he did with Spurs at that time. And we're speaking about the young talent we've had and the money we've spent, but I think it's very easy to label Pochettino with a thing of, oh, you spent $1 billion. Pochettino hasn't spent $1 billion. I would argue that Pochettino hasn't really spent a penny as Chelsea manager so far, because every signing that we've seen so far, we can't deny, has been a club signing. Pochettino didn't know a lot of these players coming in. Pochettino wanted a small squad coming in, and he still hasn't managed to achieve that. And we saw recently, it was put out in the media, that now Pochettino is going to have full reins over the transfers, the incomings and the outgoings of the club. And that says to me that he previously didn't have the full reins over the incomings and the outgoings of the club. So now, in this January transfer window, if we do spend money, I think that's where we'll really start to see Pochettino's blueprint on this team sort of put into place. And when you look at some of the signings when he was at Spurs, man, like Alderweireld, Vertonghen, I think Pochettino signed, Dele Alli, obviously Son. He really brought some great players to Spurs, and I do believe that his talent ID can be really useful for us going forward. And just to cap it off on this whole spending money thing, Pochettino, when you talk about that billion, had nothing to do with the likes of Koulibaly, nothing to do with the likes of Cucurella, Mudryk, a lot of those players there that were brought in. So none of these signings have actually been Pochettino's. And I get that people are going to get straight in the comments now and go, oh, throw more money at it. But ultimately, yeah, we might have to, because the players that have been brought in, yes, Chelsea have spent Galactico money, but we ain't bought in Galacticos. We bought in players for the future. And what better manager to fit the mould of bringing these players to their potential than Pochettino? Now, the pill of going to St James's Park and getting smashed was always going to be a bitter one to swallow. But let's not be too short-sighted to admit what we have seen so far this season in moments from Pochettino's Chelsea side. You know, what we have seen is snippets of Chelsea playing much better football than we've seen for ages. I would say since Tuchel first came in, you know. What we've also seen is the re-emergence of the likes of Cucurella, Sterling, Conor Gallagher, all players that sections of the fan base probably wanted out of the club, and now they've become first-team starters. We've also seen really good performances against the big boys, like the likes of Liverpool, Arsenal, Spurs, Manchester City, and what I will say to you is I can guarantee you it is a lot harder to put those sort of performances in and hang it with the big boys in those big games than it is to solve the riddle of how to beat the low block and break down these smaller teams, which ultimately, with Pochettino's new signings coming in that he may or may not make, could solve that riddle. And when you look at Arsenal, right, in years gone by, when Arsenal were sort of sitting around that 8th place in the table under Arteta, I'm not saying there weren't isolated results, but you know what? More often than not, when they went into a game with a Liverpool or a Manchester City, they were getting beat, they were getting outclassed and outplayed. So I do look at that and I think, brilliant. Okay, we've shown we can do that in isolated matches. Now we need the consistency. And that's the one thing we're really hanging our hat on here. Believe me, we are onto something. I truly do believe that. And as patient and as painful as it might be while we wait to get there, I do think Pochettino's the man to get us there. And if we talk about, let's delve into the alternatives, right? Okay, what's the alternative? We get rid of Pochettino. Straight away, we're under the exact same premise as we were with Roman Abramovich, which was higher fire. The only difference is that's all well and good when you're winning silverware, but now we're going to be doing it without winning silverware. There was never a time under Roman Abramovich when we had sacked, Tuchel, Potter, Lampard was interim. Say we sacked Poch. There was never a time when we sacked 3 managers consecutively and none of them have won us any silverware. So the hire and fire method is gone. That day's gone by. Now we need to look at the model that Liverpool had with Jurgen Klopp, that Arsenal had with Arteta, and back our man. And if we talk about the alternatives here, let's say in a crazy world, and we're being really trigger happy, we sack Pochettino, who are we then going to get in? Who are we going to get in? Who's on the market? Zidane, he ain't coming Chelsea. Conte, yeah, he probably would come to Chelsea, but I'll tell you what he would do. He would completely change the style of play to a much worse one than we're seeing when things are going well for us at the minute. He would bring in players to suit a completely different system to what Chelsea want to play, and then all of a sudden, within 18 months, he would find problems, whether they were valid or not, with the board. He would fall out, he would leave the club, and then we're stuck with a load of players that fit a Conte system that, let's be honest, hardly any other managers in world football play right now. Look at the other managers that are out there. Like, who are we honestly talking about? Go and get De Zerbi from Brighton. Lopetegui, he's on the market. Ruud van Nistelrooy, Hansi Flick. No. None of those managers are as good as Pochettino, and I can tell you what, none of those managers would come into Chelsea and do probably any better job long-term than Pochettino would. You've really got to remind yourself here what bracket we're shopping in now. We can't get Pep out of City, We can't take one of the top names and bring them into Chelsea. We're shopping in the market just below that and hoping we can get someone that is currently sitting there because of their previous work experience, but can go on to be a top manager, and I really, really believe that Pochettino is that man. And Pochettino can take the blame for certain shortcomings this season, and he's right to do so. But, come on, we got to look at the bigger picture, man. This ain't a Poch problem. This is an ownership problem. The owners have come in and bulldozed their way through the club since coming in, and time will tell the true story. I'm not saying that the ownership's definitely bad right now. Time might tell you in 10 years' time from now, we had a crazy 2 seasons where everything was up in the air, but actually, because of the recruitment we had done, we didn't need to spend all that much money for that long after, and because of the things we had put in place, it was chaos when it happened, but it worked out for us in the long term. I'm not writing off that possibility, but at the moment, no manager could come into Chelsea, I think, and just have a completely clean run at things and accumulate way more points and be fighting at the top of the league. So I do look at that, and I think the ownership is going to be a massive hindrance on anyone that comes in to this club. We now need to accept that and give Poch time to ride out the storm, because good managers make good owners. Arsenal fans were not having the Cronkies until Arteta started doing well. Man United, I completely understand that there were protests going on about the Glazers long before Fergie left, but they didn't intensify until things started going badly. There's many clubs that when things aren't going too badly for them and the manager's delivering well, you sort of don't think about the owners all that much. So look, I am not saying it is not justified for any of you to be questioning the decisions that Pochettino has made, the shortcomings he's had, the fact he was sitting in the stands for that match. But I am telling you, with Potter, I never really thought it was going to work. As much as I love Lampard, you could see what way it was going. Even with Tuchel towards the end, was his sacking fair? No. But were we on a downwards trend at that time? Yes. I'm just saying, I look at Pochettino and I think, mate, when we've got this young squad, there is no better man and more proven man for bringing these players through and getting us to where we need to be. We need to give him our undivided faith as a fan base right now until we're proven otherwise. Because at the moment, whether you like inconsistency or not, and I'm guessing every single Chelsea fan out there, as myself, does not like the inconsistency, we're just going to have to put up with it for a bit. The grass is not always greener, and I would put every penny to my name on it. There's not a manager out there that's going to come into Chelsea and do a better job right now, because sometimes what you see on the surface, which is the managerial decisions, is not what is going on behind closed doors. Give it time. Judge Pochettino once he's got his signings in, and once we've got a much bigger back catalogue of games to go by, and once he's had a lot more time to work with these players. It didn't happen for Arteta straight away. It didn't happen for Klopp straight away. It even didn't happen for Pep straight away at Manchester City. Don't hold Poch to those same standards. We are where we are now. We've got to be realistic as a fan base and not think, someone should come in and have us competing for titles straight away. That's not how it is anymore. We've got to be accepting of that. If you don't like it, go and support another club, because that is not how it is anymore. We've got to back him. We've got to put our faith in him. And I think one day I'm going to be sat here quite smug at the fact that I was able to do this, because Poch will have us up there or thereabouts competing. People, let me know your thoughts. If you don't agree with me, that's completely fine. I love to hear opinions that are different to my own. So please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll be trying to read them all. I'll get back to as many of you as I possibly can. If you stuck around to the end of the video, thank you very much. Do me a favour, if you're not already, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. I will see you all for my Chelsea against Brighton preview, dropping either tomorrow or Friday. I'll see you in the next one.